Welcome to ESL listening practice. Imagine stepping onto a tennis court after spending, 10 years reading books about how to play tennis.
Right. You've memorized all the rules.
Exactly. You know exactly how the racket should be held and, well, you have all the dimensions of the court completely memorized.
But you've never actually swung a racket.
Yeah. And the moment a real ball is hit towards you, your legs simply do not know how to run and your arm just, does not know how to swing.
Which is a terrifying feeling.
It is. And honestly, this happens to English learners all the time. You reach an intermediate level, you understand almost everything you hear, but when it is actually time to speak, you completely freeze.
Yeah, we see this so much.
We really do. So today, we are skipping the long introductions. Through our own research and, our many years standing inside English classrooms all over the world, we have identified a very specific set of 10 roadblocks that cause this exact freezing problem.
And we are going to explain the mechanics of what slows you down and, more importantly, how to finally break through that wall.
It is a familiar story for so many of you. You reach a B2 level, which is, a fantastic achievement.
No, absolutely. It's a huge milestone.
But the journey from intermediate to advanced feels entirely different from the journey from beginner to intermediate. The strategies that helped you pass those basic exams are actually the same strategies that are now stopping you from speaking smoothly.
Right, they become a trap.
Exactly. So today, we are speaking directly to you. We are treating you as the highly capable learner you are, while keeping our English clear and accessible so you can get some great listening practice while we talk.
And the very first thing we have to examine isn't your vocabulary or your textbook. It is what happens in your mind before you even open your mouth.
The psychological side of things.
Exactly. We have to talk about the desire to be absolutely perfect.
I see this constantly in my classes. Learners just build this massive wall of pressure around themselves.
Yeah, they really do.
And the most obvious way this perfectionism shows up is in a complete obsession with grammar.
Oh, grammar obsession is huge.
Let's look at exactly what happens in the brain. So a student wants to say something really simple, like telling a story about what they did last weekend.
Right.
But instead of just talking, they start running this intense mental checklist.
Yeah.
They think, wait, is this the past simple or the past continuous?
Should I use have been or was?
Exactly. And by the time they finish calculating the perfect sentence, the moment has completely passed.
The conversation has already moved on.
Yeah, and they just sit there in silence.
Which is so frustrating because you talking about the difference between knowing the rules of a language and actually using the language.
Right.
When you study grammar intensely, you are basically training your brain to be an editor. And an editor's job is to look for mistakes and fix them.
Okay, yeah.
But when you are in a real live conversation, you just do not have time to be an editor. The human brain cannot easily create a thought, translate the thought, check the thought against a list of grammar rules, and then move the mouth to speak all in like half a second. The brain gets overwhelmed by the demand and simply shuts down. You just freeze.
But wait, let me push back on that idea for a second.
Yeah.
Because isn't grammar the basic essential architecture of the language?
Well, yes.
So if we tell learners to stop focusing on the rules, are we just encouraging them to learn bad habits? If a student constantly says he goes instead of he goes, and they never focus on the grammar.
It is a completely valid concern. And we certainly are not saying that grammar is useless. Grammar is the skeleton of the language.
Okay.
But you cannot build a relationship with a skeleton.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to put it.
Right. The primary goal of any language is human connection and communication. It is not mechanical perfection. If you say, yesterday I go to the store, the grammar is technically wrong.
Yeah, obviously.
But guess what? The listener still knows exactly what you mean. The message was successfully delivered.
That makes a lot of sense.
The problem with over-focusing on grammar is that it shifts your priority away from sharing ideas and towards, passing an invisible test.
And nobody wants to be taking a test while they're just having coffee with a friend.
Exactly. When you are speaking, your only goal should be making sure the other person understands your idea. The refinement of the grammar will come naturally over time through more listening and more practice, not through, mental calculations during a chat.
That distinction between passing an invisible test and just sharing an idea is really powerful. Because when you feel like you were taking a test, you naturally become terrified of failing.
Absolutely.
And that fear of making mistakes is the ultimate silencer. It is the direct result of obsessing over grammar. When you spend years worrying about the rules, you naturally become completely paralyzed by the thought of breaking them.
Yeah, the fear takes over.
I have talked to students who tell me they would honestly rather stay quiet for an entire 2-hour dinner party than risk making one tiny error in front of native speakers.
Really? An entire dinner party?
Yes, because they feel embarrassed. They think the mistake will make them look unintelligent.
Which is such a heartbreaking psychological block. The fear of judgment actually triggers a real physical response.
Like sweating, right?
Yeah, your heart rate increases, you feel anxious, and that anxiety creates an actual wall in your mind. Linguists sometimes call this the emotional filter.
The emotional filter, okay.
When that filter is high because of stress or fear, your brain literally blocks your access to the vocabulary you already know.
Wait, really? It blocks it?
Yes. Have you ever felt like you forgot a word, but then the moment the conversation ended and the pressure was gone, you suddenly remembered it?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
That is the emotional filter at work. Staying silent protects you from that uncomfortable feeling in the moment, but it guarantees that you will never improve.
You know, it reminds me of the physics of learning how to ride a bicycle.
Okay, how so?
Well, you cannot learn to balance on a bike by sitting in your living room reading a physics textbook about gravity and momentum. You can memorize every single fact about bicycles, but the moment you sit on the seat, you are going to wobble. Making mistakes is not a sign of failure. It is a required mechanical step in the learning process.
You have to feel the imbalance.
Exactly. You have to get on the bike, you have to wobble, and sometimes you just have to fall down. Because every single time you lose your balance, your brain receives feedback.
It learns what not to do.
Right. It learns, okay, leaning that far to the left does not work. Let's adjust. If you refuse to wobble because you are afraid of looking silly, your brain never gets that essential feedback.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Language requires that exact same neurological feedback loop.
The wobble.
The wobble, yeah. The messy, broken, imperfect English is totally necessary. When you speak and make a mistake, and then you notice that mistake, your brain adjusts the balance. It slowly calibrates.
But if you never speak,
Then there is nothing for your brain to calibrate. Messy English is infinitely more valuable than silent, perfect English that never leaves your head.
so true. But because learners are so terrified of that wobble, they develop these coping mechanisms. They try to find a safety net to ensure they never fall.
And what's the biggest safety net?
Well, it's relying on their native language. They try to perfectly plan what they're going to say in their mother tongue first.
Oh, yes, the translation trap.
Right. This leads us straight into our next massive roadblock, which is translating word by word.
This habit is just so deeply programmed into intermediate learners. The process usually looks a bit like this. You hear a sentence in English. You instantly translate that sentence into your native language in your head, just so you can understand it safely.
Like a protective shield.
Exactly. Then you think of your response in your native language. And finally, you take your response and you try to translate it back into English, literally picking it apart word by single word.
I always compare this to trying to navigate the streets of New York City using a map of London.
Oh, I like that.
Right, because it is a completely flawed system. You might find a street on the map that looks a little bit similar, so you turn left, but suddenly you're driving the wrong way down a one-way street.
Because the cities are built differently.
Exactly. The architecture of the cities is fundamentally different. Languages are the exact same way. The grammar structures, the rhythm, the order of the words, they just do not map perfectly onto each other.
Your map analogy perfectly explains the structural failure of translation. Every language has its own unique logic.
Right.
When you translate word by word, you are not actually speaking English. You are just speaking your native language while wearing English masks.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to say it.
Because, for instance, in many Romance languages, the descriptive word, the adjective, comes after the object.
Right, like car red.
Exactly. If you translate the concept of a red car directly, word for word, you will say the car red. Or consider idioms and cultural phrases.
Those are the worst to translate.
They are. If you are angry and you translate a common expression from your language directly into English, the other person will likely have absolutely no idea what you were talking about. The logic simply does not transfer.
And beyond the structural errors, we really have to talk about the sheer exhaustion of doing this. Let's look at the cognitive load.
It is exhausting.
It is. If you are translating back and forth, your brain is essentially running two heavy software programs at the exact same time.
That's a lot of computing power.
Right. You are listening, converting the words, processing the meaning, formulating a reply, converting the reply back, and then trying to command your mouth to speak.
No wonder people get headaches.
Exactly. It is a massive drain on your mental energy. It is no wonder that so many B2 learners tell me they feel physically tired after just a 15-minute conversation in English.
Yeah.
Your brain is doing quadruple the work of a native speaker.
Exactly, because your working memory only has a limited amount of space. If that space is entirely filled with translation tasks, there is no room left for paying attention to the actual conversation.
You can't even read the room.
No, you can't read the other person's body language or just let the conversation flow naturally. The delay between hearing a question and answering it becomes noticeably long.
Right, that awkward pause.
Yeah, that pause. To speed up your progress and actually sound natural, you have to cut out the middleman. You must train yourself to associate feelings, images, and actions directly with the English words, entirely bypassing your native language.
But, bypassing the native language sounds really great in theory. Like, just think in English. It is advice we hear all the time.
Right, it's very common advice.
But here's the reality. If you want to think directly in English without translating, you need to be able to retrieve words instantly.
They have to be right there.
The word has to be right there in your mind, ready to go. And this exposes another massive problem. The way most learners try to build that vocabulary memory is fundamentally broken.
Oh, completely broken.
They use methods that actually fight against how the human brain naturally stores information. So let's talk about the habit of learning words without any context.
This is a habit that schools, honestly, accidentally teach us.
Oh, the vocabulary list.
Yes, the classic homework assignment is a long list of 50 random English words with their native translations written right next to them.
I hated those.
We all did. The student spends hours staring at this list, trying to forcefully memorize it for a test on Friday.
And they usually pass the test.
They might pass the test, sure. But by Monday, 45 of those words have completely vanished from their memory.
Poof, gone.
Gone. Trying to memorize isolated words on a blank page is highly inefficient because words do not exist in a vacuum. A word is only a tool to describe a specific situation.
Right.
If you memorize the verb to run, but you have never read it in a story or heard it in an exciting context, your brain does not know what to do with it.
I always wonder why the brain rejects those lists so aggressively. In school, we are always given lists to memorize, so why is this so bad for our English progress?
Because the brain needs connections.
My theory is that the human brain operates like a giant web of associations. It needs to connect new information to old information to make it stick.
Yes, that's exactly it.
If you just throw a random disconnected word into your brain, it is like tossing a single piece of paper into a dark, empty room.
It just gets lost.
Right, it just flows to the floor and gets lost in the shadows. But when you learn a word within a rich context, say you read a thrilling story about a man running away from a dangerous bear, you turn the lights on in that room.
You give the word life.
Exactly. The brain creates a detailed file folder for the word run. It connects the word to the feeling of fear, the image of the bear, the concept of speed. It attaches the word to a whole network of meaning.
That network of meaning is exactly how memory works. It's called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, right.
It's the brain's ability to form new connections, and it relies heavily on associations. When you encounter a word in a real article or in a funny video or in a movie scene that made you cry, the emotion and the visual scene act like glue.
The emotion is the glue. I love that.
Yeah. The word sticks because it is attached to a real experience, but creating that file folder is only the very first step of the process.
Right. What's next?
Well, having a file folder is useless if you put it in a drawer and never open it again. Which brings us to a critical failure in study routines.
Not reviewing what you learned.
Exactly. Not reviewing what you have learned.
This is what I call the leaky bucket problem.
The leaky bucket.
Yeah. Imagine you are pouring water into a wooden bucket, but there is a hole in the bottom.
Okay, I can picture that.
You can pour and pour, spending hours every single day gathering amazing vocabulary in perfect context. You're doing everything right.
But the water is still leaking.
Exactly. Because there is a hole in your memory, the water simply leaks out. The words disappear. Our brains are actually designed to forget things.
Forgetting is completely natural.
Right. Forgetting is a feature, not a bug. If we remembered every single thing we saw every day, our minds would be totally overwhelmed. So the brain constantly throws away information that it assumes is useless.
That is a very important biological point. The brain is basically an efficiency machine. It deletes anything it thinks you will not need for your actual survival.
So how do you convince your brain that an English word is essential for survival.
You have to show it to the brain repeatedly.
Right.
If you encounter a new phrase once, the brain categorizes it as low priority. If you do not see it again, it is deleted within a few days.
Thrown in the trash.
Exactly. But if you review that word the next day, and then you use it in a sentence 3 days later, and then hear it in a song the following week, you are sending a really strong signal to your nervous system.
You're saying, hey, keep this.
Yes, you are telling your brain, pay attention, we use this tool constantly, lock it in.
The repetition patches the hole in the bucket. I think a lot of learners believe that learning is an event that happens just once.
Like a light switch.
Right. You read a word, you understand it, therefore you have learned it forever. But true language acquisition is a continuous cycle.
It never really stops.
You have to revisit your notes. You have to rewatch a video without the subtitles. But here is where we hit another bump in the road. Reviewing and practicing requires action. You have to actually interact with the language. And a lot of learners get trapped in a comfort zone where they only perform one type of action.
Oh, this is so common.
Let's dig into the danger of relying on only one single method of practice.
It is incredibly common for a student to find a specific tool they enjoy and then completely abandon all other forms of practice.
Like what?
Often, this happens with language learning apps on smartphones.
Of the apps, yes.
They are highly convenient, they use gamification to make learning feel like playing the video game, and they are very good at keeping you engaged.
Right.
But if you are only using an app to learn English, your progress will inevitably hit a ceiling. You are only developing a very narrow set of skills.
Right.
You cannot build an entire house using nothing but a hammer. A hammer is a great tool, but eventually you are going to need a saw and a drill and a measuring tape.
I want to push back on that slightly, though, because those apps are heavily researched, right? They are designed by brilliant linguists and software engineers.
They are very well made, yeah.
They guide you from basic vocabulary all the way through complex grammar structures. They even have little microphone features where you repeat sentences. So why isn't a really good app enough to make you fluent if you dedicate an hour to it every single day?
Because an app, no matter how well designed it is an entirely sterile, controlled environment.
Like a clean room.
Exactly. Think of it like a laboratory. Inside the app, the audio is recorded by professional voice actors. They speak slowly, with perfect pronunciation, in a quiet room with no background noise.
And the sentences are always perfect.
Yeah, the sentences are logically structured and perfectly complete. It is very safe. But the real world is chaotic. Real English is wild.
It really is.
In a real conversation, people speak too quickly, they mumble, they use heavy regional accents. A truck drives by and covers up half the sentence.
Right, you miss half the words.
Exactly. People use slang, and they constantly interrupt each other. If you only train in the silent laboratory of an app, stepping into a real conversation will feel like stepping into a hurricane. You are only exercising one specific muscle.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It is like spending a year at the gym only lifting weights with your right arm.
You'd look pretty funny.
You really would.
Yeah.
You might build an incredibly strong right bicep, but the rest of your body is completely weak and out of balance. And we see this imbalance all the time when it comes to the different senses.
Yes. The reading versus listening imbalance.
Many learners have a massive muscular right arm when it comes to reading. They can read a complex news article and understand almost everything.
But they're listening.
But their left arm, their listening skill is severely underdeveloped. They simply ignore listening practice.
Which is a fatal flaw if your goal is to actually speak with humans.
Right.
When learners rely almost entirely on textbooks, written exercises, or text-based apps, they are training their eyes, but they are completely starving their ears. Because reading is a very safe activity. You control the speed of time.
That's true. The words don't move.
The text is frozen on the page. If you do not understand a sentence, you can stop, look at it for 5 minutes, analyze the grammar, and check a dictionary.
Take your time.
But spoken language does not wait for you. The words exist as sound waves in the air for a fraction of a second, and then they're gone forever.
If you miss it, you miss it.
Exactly. If your ears are not trained to catch those fast-moving sounds, you will be lost.
And spoken English is notoriously tricky because native speakers rarely pronounce words the way they are written. If a learner has only ever seen the phrase written down perfectly, their brain will simply not recognize it when it is smashed together in connected speech.
That's why listening is so crucial.
So the solution is obvious. You have to expose your ears to the wild environment. You have to listen to podcasts, watch videos, and hear real conversations regularly. The ears need to be trained just like the eyes.
Precisely. You have to train your auditory processing speed.
Hmm.
But we must issue a strong warning here.
Oh, what's the warning?
While listening is absolutely critical, it is only half of the equation. And this leads us to what is arguably the most damaging roadblock of all.
Okay, I'm ready.
The failure to actually open your mouth and speak.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
There is a massive population of learners who are what I call input millionaires.
Input millionaires, I like that.
They consume hundreds of hours of English videos, they listen to daily podcasts, they read English books, but they are output bankrupt.
They never speak.
They almost never practice speaking out loud.
An input without output is a trap that feels really productive. You feel like you are studying because you are watching a video.
It feels like work.
It does. But I always tell my students that listening without speaking is like watching professional sports on television every weekend for 5 years, and then genuinely believing you are ready to be an athlete.
You wouldn't last a minute on the field.
No. You know the rules, you know the strategy, but your body has never actually performed the action. Speaking is not just a mental exercise. It is a highly physical activity.
Very physical.
It requires the coordination of dozens of small muscles in your face, your jaw, your tongue, and your throat.
That physical component is rarely discussed, but it is deeply important. Your native language requires your mouth to move in very specific, familiar patterns.
Muscle memory.
Yes, English requires entirely different shapes and muscle movements. When you try to speak English after only ever listening to it, your brain knows exactly what word it wants to say.
But the mouth refuses.
Exactly. Your facial muscles do not know how to execute the command smoothly. It feels clumsy. The tongue feels thick and uncooperative.
I call it the lazy tongue syndrome. Your mouth simply hasn't built the muscle memory yet. You have to literally train your physical muscles to form the English sounds.
It takes actual practice.
And the beautiful thing is, you do not need a conversation partner to start building that muscle memory.
You really don't.
You just need to vibrate your vocal cords. You can talk to yourself while you are alone in your apartment. You can narrate your daily actions.
Like describing what you were doing.
Yeah, like, okay, now I am opening the refrigerator. I'm taking out the eggs. The pan is heating up. It feels absolutely ridiculous the first few times you do it. But speaking out loud to yourself is one of the most powerful ways to wake up that lazy tongue.
It really works. It forces your brain to practice pulling vocabulary from those mental file folders.
Yes, it forces real-time processing.
Narrating your life is a phenomenal strategy. And to tie all of these methods together, the balancing of reading, the active listening, the daily speaking, and the regular reviewing, you have to manage your time effectively.
Because the mechanics of learning are useless if your schedule is broken.
Exactly. If your study schedule is fundamentally flawed, you won't get anywhere. So let's look at the problem of studying irregularly.
This is the student who feels very motivated on a Sunday afternoon. They sit down at their desk, brew a large pot of coffee, and study English intensely for 4 straight hours. They close their books, feeling incredibly accomplished. But then, Monday arrives. Work gets busy. Tuesday passes. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday all go by without them looking at a single English word.
They do absolutely nothing all week.
Right. They rely entirely on massive, exhausting sessions once a week.
And that approach completely violates everything we know about how the brain forms long-term memories.
It just doesn't work.
Imagine trying to nourish your body the same way. What would happen if you decided to eat all 21 of your weekly meals on Sunday afternoon, and then you starved yourself for the next 6 days?
You would be incredibly sick.
Your body would be violently ill on Sunday, and you would be completely devoid of energy by Wednesday. It does not work for your body, and it does not work for your brain.
That's a great comparison.
The human brain processes information similarly. It needs consistent, steady nutrition to grow and strengthen neural pathways.
Plus, there is the crucial role of sleep. When you learn something new, your brain needs a sleep cycle to consolidate that information and move it from short-term to long-term memory.
Sleep is when the actual learning happens.
Exactly. If you cram for 4 hours on Sunday, you only get 1 sleep cycle to process a massive amount of data. Most of it just gets lost.
It's too much data for one night.
But if you study for just 10 or 15 minutes a day, every single day, you are utilizing 7 sleep cycles a week to lock in that new vocabulary.
Which builds a much stronger foundation.
Small daily exposure keeps the English language active in your background consciousness. your brain stays in English mode.
Exactly. Short, daily practice is much more effective than long, irregular sessions. 10 minutes a day is better than 3 hours once a week because it builds a habit. Consistency beats intensity every single time.
It really does.
A daily habit transforms English from an academic subject you study into a natural part of your daily life.
But, even if you manage to build a perfect daily routine, there is one final trap that can destroy your progress instantly.
The motivation killer.
Yes, it is an emotional trap, and it is more common now than ever before. We really have to talk about the toxic habit of comparing yourself to others.
Oh, this might be the ultimate killer of motivation.
It really is. You finally establish your daily routine, you are practicing your speaking, you are reviewing your vocabulary, and you are feeling good.
You're on a roll.
But then you open up social media, or you go to a group class, and you see someone who started learning English at the exact same time as you, but their accent is flawless.
They use sophisticated vocabulary effortlessly.
Right. They're laughing and joking with native speakers. And instantly, a dark cloud descends over you. You think, what is wrong with me? I work so hard, but I am still struggling. I must simply be bad at languages.
It is a very natural human instinct to look around and compare our status to others. We all do it.
We do.
But in language learning, comparing your progress to other people is an entirely false and unfair metric. When you compare yourself to that person on social media, you are seeing their final polished performance.
You aren't seeing the reality.
You do not see the hundreds of embarrassing mistakes they made in private. You do not see their unique advantages. You do not know if their native language shares a huge amount of similar vocabulary with English, giving them a massive head start.
Like a Spanish speaker learning English versus a Japanese speaker learning English?
Exactly. You do not know if they have more free time, less stress at work, or a completely different cognitive learning style.
You are comparing your messy, behind-the-scenes reality to their highlight reel.
That's exactly what it is, a highlight reel.
Every single brain wires itself differently. Some people naturally absorb accents like a sponge, while others struggle with pronunciation, but can instantly grasp complex sentence structures. Your background, your free time, your journey, it's all influenced by 1,000 variables that are unique to your life.
So true.
I constantly remind my learners that there is only one valid comparison you are allowed to make. Focus only on your own progress. You are only allowed to compare your English today to your own English from last month.
That is the only metric of success that actually matters. If you record yourself speaking for 2 minutes today and then you listen to a recording you made 6 months ago, you will almost certainly notice improvement.
You will hear the difference.
You will hear that you are pausing less, that your vocabulary is slightly richer. Celebrating those personal incremental victories is what provides the psychological fuel to keep going on the days when the process feels difficult.
It is about owning your specific journey. Let's pull all of these pieces together. We have explored the underlying mechanics of what holds intermediate learners back.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. The overarching theme here in our findings is that language acquisition is not a mathematical formula to be perfectly solved. Learning English is a journey, and making mistakes is just a normal, messy, biological, human part of the process.
Overcoming these roadblocks requires a shift in how you treat yourself. You have to drop the perfectionism and allow yourself to wobble on the bicycle.
Allow yourself to wobble. I love that.
If you actively work to correct these specific habits, if you practice bypassing your native language to stop translating, if you prioritize real-world communication over flawless grammar, the wall will break.
And if you consistently review your vocabulary in rich contexts and train both your ears and your physical mouth every single day.
Yes, the wall that you have hit will begin to crumble. The keys to success, to advancing from intermediate to advanced, are not found in a magic textbook.
No, they aren't.
They are found in consistent daily practice, fueled by a kind and positive attitude toward your own mistakes. Avoid these 10 problems, and you will feel more confident and improve much faster.
I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We didn't explicitly discuss this exact scenario today, but based on everything we covered about how the brain learns, I want you to imagine a hypothetical situation.
Right.
Imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, and for some strange reason, you had completely lost the ability to read or write any language at all.
Wow. Okay.
Those visual skills are just gone. How would you redesign your daily English learning using absolutely nothing but your ears, your voice, and your physical environment?
That is a really interesting restriction.
Think about how that restriction might actually force you to stop translating, force you to speak, and completely accelerate your ability to communicate naturally. Think about how much faster you might actually learn.
That is a fascinating mental exercise. Stripping away the safety of the written word forces the brain to adapt to the pure, raw reality of human communication. It forces you to listen deeply and speak bravely.
Exactly. Speak bravely. Thank you so much for joining us today on ESL Listening Practice. Just by focusing on this conversation today, your ears have done some excellent work. Your brain is building those connections.
Yeah, absolutely is.
So as you go about the rest of your day, try to narrate what you are doing out loud. Make a few glorious, messy mistakes and keep moving forward.